Nellie Neal, the Garden Mama, now our guest in the Element Wealth studio, the host, of course, of Weekend Gardening. Garden Mama, always good to see you.
It's wonderful to be here, Gerard. I will tell you that they have named us the Garden Mama Show in the interim, and that's a very happy move for me. But we are still on the weekend.
Okay.
So what's going on? How did your container beauties make it through all of that crazy cold weather?
They didn't.
Oh,
except the pansies and the snapdragons and some of the dianthus survived it. But I was doing well with the geraniums. I was so excited maybe they'll make it through because, you know, they go through kind of that downturn at the end of the summer.
But they often can come back, but
and they
not
come
always.
back, right, in the fall. And they didn't. They were beautiful all fall. And then as soon as that rather cold weather came through.
The untimely event.
Yeah.
None of us cared for. My lettuce didn't like it either.
Okay.
So it was kind of a scorch. But as you say, the pansies and the snapdragons and dianthus and those things are doing fine. Larkspurs, all of those babies are doing great. A lot of people asking about, are we out of this drought? And in fact, we are just barely out of the drought.
Okay.
And that's very good news.
From all the rain we've had?
From all the rain that we've had and our cumulative numbers. Everything's relative, particularly like drought.
Yeah.
My friends on the West Coast say, well, even when you all had a drought, you had more rain than we have in 6 months. Well, yes, but we're accustomed to a different dynamic, a different environmental dynamic. Lots of people looking for how to replace that tree that croaked. And sometimes it's the Indian hawthorn shrubs that just got devastated by first drought, then freeze, and they're not going to come back.
See them everywhere.
Especially if they're in the front yard. I say let them go.
Yeah, they're just.
Let's put something else to look at out there.
They're brittle twigs.
Yeah,
a collection of them everywhere.
And even if we spray painted them some bright color, I don't think we would like their effect. So I think it's time to think about other stuff.
Laura Petalum also. It took it.
Some took it pretty rough.
Yeah.
I have 3 refugee Laura Petalums. They were in a tree form at one point, and they were also in another bed at another point, and I've propagated them a couple of times. They're still alive, but they really look tired. They look like they've been through a long winter, so I'm hopeful there'll be flowers, but I don't know.
Yeah.
We may have to go another route on them. My spireas, the Japanese spireas, have taken a bit of a hit, but they are already leafing out again, as are things like hydrangeas and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I've got Prince William spireas. Prince William. And, of course, they go dormant and they shed during the cold months.
They'll lose
a
little
back.
and then they come back around again.
Back. I think I've kind of checked the branches. They seem fine. Something else you see a lot are the magnolias, especially the ornamental magnolias that really got devastated.
Tough stuff.
Really something. And I, normally plant them in, of course, an arrangement of 3. And I've got a 3 planted on the side of my driveway. 2 are doing fine, thriving. 1 didn't survive, and I guess I attribute that to the drought. Although I kept them irrigated.
We had such a wet winter last year that if their feet got too wet, if the root zone got too wet, they might have gone through the drought better.
Okay.
But they might have gone through it worse. You know what I mean? If the one is in the low spot and it didn't make it, then we can figure that it just could not recover from the wet and then the drought. And then the cold, and then the heat, and all the other things that happened last year. I do see an awful lot of things like Leland cypress and the big cypress juniper type things, the bigger ones of that category, that just are going to have to be replaced because they are not alive.
I've got a collection of 3 in the rear corner of my yard that I planted when we moved into the house 15 years ago, and they've since grown up. They're probably 20 feet high, 15 feet wide. I mean, they're beautiful specimens. And 1 just completely turned brown. Had to remove it here recently. The other 2 have some brown branches in them, and I'm going to cut them out. Hopefully they will survive. The cryptomeria, too.
Yeah, the cryptomerias as well. All of those in that conifer group have had a tough go. And if we end up with just a few browned out spots, then certainly what we want to do is prune them, because then if they occur again, we know we've got another problem, which it may be spider mites.
Okay.
We may have, it may or may not be related because the trees are in stress. They're vulnerable to a lot of other problems.
Speaking of which, the pine trees all over the place.
Oh, dear.
I saw that my county of Madison, I believe, is seeking some disaster relief funding to take the trees out.
There are so many that need to be removed
for fear of the safety around the roads,
yes,
that they're just going to ultimately going to fall, and they could fall on a road or on a motorist.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When the pine trees are lifted, they are particularly vulnerable with storms, bad conditions. The earth both swelling and then shrinking from drought pulls those roots hard, and when they settle back down, it is almost as if they set up the lighthouse to tell the insects to come and get me. And that's where, of course, the boring insects get into the top of the tree, and you see them all browned out at the top. That's not going to stop on its own, and it doesn't usually stop even if you try to get it to stop, because the trees are so weak at that point.
Yeah.
And we're going to see a lot of loss. I hope they're able to get whatever kind of funding they need to do that, but I also hope that people don't just start, frankly, going out and injuring themselves by trying to do it themselves, because it's a lot of work. Those trees are tall. They're taller than you think they are.
Yeah, no doubt. I lost one, only one, and had it removed. I think that's what happened. It got stressed out from the drought, then the beetles attacked it. And I've always felt like, and I guess heard, and perhaps you can comment on this, that if you don't address that and remove that tree, that once they're devoured that one, they just move to the next one.
Yes. They're very happy to take over any pine tree in the range of where they are, and they do multiply. So they're always looking for another food source. Sadly, the tree next to yours, next to the one that's already sick, is probably going to get worn out, and they're going to go to the next one. And it's a problem.
So if you take one out that they've just completely obliterated, does that mitigate and reduce that risk of them moving on to the next one or not?
It's kind of like rolling the dice.
Okay.
It might, but it might not.
Okay.
That's another reason for removing the damage, so you can see whether it's proceeding.
I see.
And then 6 months from now, one of my classic pieces is when you get into a house and you've got a landscape, take pictures of it. And then 5 years from now, or 2 years, or whenever you can remember, take another set of pictures. And if you have those over time, for instance, in that 15-year span that you've been in the house, sadly, you would see how beautifully things grew, and then you would see how sadly they didn't.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if we don't recognize those things, then we don't know. We end up, sometimes people will buy a house that has been way overplanted and has been there for years, and they want me to tell them what to cut down. Well, the first answer is, what bloomed this year, wait a year, all these things that you have to do. But sometimes things are encroaching on the house, or they're over the driveway, and you just have to do a little bit of that sort of work. We're going to see a lot of that this spring.
Okay. Well, of course, as far as foundation plantings around homes and so forth, various varieties of hollies are very popular, and it was kind of hit and miss on how they fared.
Some are damaged and some are not.
Yeah.
There are, generally speaking, it seems counterintuitive, but the smaller leafed hollies did suffered more damage than the large leaf hollies.
Okay.
Which you wouldn't think, but there's such tough leaves that may have something to do with it. Or because we've grown those varieties for so long, they've just gotten used to being in this kind of up and down, weather that we have.
Well, my big Christmas tree shaped pruned Nellie Neal hollies did fine.
Love that.
They're beautiful. And I like that shape, that sort of conical shape. Did great. Got a cluster of 3 on the right side of my house. Got a big one in my backyard. It's probably now 30 feet high, which is really big. And it's beautiful, and it's thriving, and it's fine. But some of my Clearas, mature Clearas, just checked out. Had to replace them.
We don't always know why that happens, but we do know that in a year, I've seen 2 different surveys of shrubs across the Southeast. Things like Clearas, pittosporums, the ones we see all the time. And there's about a 30% loss across the Southeast. And that's one reason why we are seeing so many more entire garden centers full of shrubs right now, full of trees, because it's time to do that. It's time to do that work. And frankly, even if it's alive and you want to stick it in the backyard, that's fine. But don't give yourself something to come home and drive in your driveway and see that you just don't know if it's alive. It's the same reason if you're only going to irrigate something, irrigate your front yard, because then at least you have a nice view when you get in. Your neighbors will still talk about you, but maybe not as much.
So what do we need to be doing now from a gardening perspective?
Right
we
now,
got about a minute left here.
Planting potatoes, pruning roses, planting those roses, planting your shrubs and trees. Get to it.
That's right. This is the time to prune roses,
right?
right
Now, exactly.
Yeah, February is what I've always been told. That's the time to do it.
I have the pricks on my fingers right now.
So how much should you cut them back?
If it's a landscape rose, take it back by about a third.
Okay, a third. Okay, good advice.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, Garden Mama. Thanks for coming on, and
Y'all
congratulations.
Tune in tomorrow. See you then.
New show name is?
Thank you. The Garden Mama Show, 8 a.m.
Love it. Coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio.